Hello everybody, thank you for joining this webinar. So I'm Alexandra, I'm responsible for startup relation at Sigfox, and I'm very happy to welcome today Benoit from Groowster, who is going to run a webinar about how not to fail as a salesperson, and he will go through the 10 most common pitfalls and give you some advice to avoid them. So the webinar will last about 30 minutes, and then you will have 10 minutes to ask whatever you want. You'll be able to use the question box at the right of your screen. So Benoit, if you want to start, go ahead.
Yeah, off we go. Great. Hi, Alexandra. Hi, Sigfox. Thank you for having me. I don't quite know how many of you there are right now, but what we are going to talk about today is sales. So for those of you who were at my last webinar, we talked about lead generation and how to succeed with finding your next potential clients. And now the idea will be to how do you actually get to close them. So just to give you a little bit of context on what my conception of sales is, particularly in B2B, I personally don't believe that to be a good at sales, you have to be somehow gifted in a way or another. I personally believe that sales is nothing magical. You don't appear magically gifted in sales. You actually become a good sales, and sales is a skill, is a sum of skills that you actually get and develop. And so the idea here today will be to give you a little bit of advices and to go through 10 of the most common mistakes that that entrepreneurs and beginner sales tend to do, and which I have done as well, and how to avoid them and how to correct them. And we'll end with some goodies that I'm sure you will love, and also answer your questions. So before we get going, and to give you a little bit of a background on who we are. So we are a Groowster, and we are a Paris and Toulouse based. Toulouse is in the south of France, by the way, and we specialize in lead generation. So we work in two ways. The first one is a agency, so we operate and design lead generation strategies for our clients. And the second one is a boot camp where we teach entrepreneurs and employees how to generate leads using LinkedIn and emails. And it typically lasts 1 day plus an online course. And people leave at night with their first leads because we execute on the day. And the idea is that when we created Groowster a while ago, it was we were pretty young, so it was like 6 months ago. We were pretty much left alone in the desert. We had no idea where we were going, and we basically had no product and no business model, not whatsoever. All we had was like a skill, which was like lead generation, B2B lead generation, and we had no precise idea where we would be going. And so what we did is we used sales as and our own techniques as means to experiment the market, confront ourselves to the market's needs, and go where we could and experiment on it. And we've been pretty successful with it because we managed to grow from 0 to 50 clients in 6 months using the techniques that we'll be going through today. And the idea is that I've been gaining quite a lot of knowledge as a salesperson in the meantime, because I've been going through a hell of a lot of sales meetings and calls, and I will be giving you feedback on this as well. So who am I? I'm Benoit. I'm the co-founder and somehow head of sales at Groowster. And yeah, I've been taking care of most of the 50 plus clients that we've been closing over the last 6 months. So how are we gonna proceed today? So first of all, we'll be going through 10 of what I consider being the most common pitfalls in sales. Secondly, I will be giving you my 5 most valuable advices to thrive in sales. A little spoiler here: most of them revolve around questions, because questions are maybe the cornerstone and the most important thing in sales. And if you don't grasp and if you don't use questions in sales, you're pretty much screwed. And last but not least, we'll be going through your questions and have a bit of a wrap up. So let's get going. Um, yeah, so, but first, let me give you a little story. So I've pretty much spoiled it now. I got carried away a bit. The idea is that the sales have pretty much helped us, as I told you, get going and finding our idea for the bootcamp. Which is quite our muse today, and it's getting us like somehow 80% of our revenue today. And the bootcamp, the idea of the bootcamp here is the direct results of confronting ourselves to the market and gathering feedback over our sales calls. Okay, so uh, the first most common pitfall, and one that I did, was actually it's a little bit counterintuitive, but relying too much on sales techniques per se. The idea is that what you do as an entrepreneur, what you do as a company, is solve a problem in the marketplace. And so if your product is not good, if your product doesn't tackle that much of a problem, and if you are not able, if the product is not able to deliver the value that it promises, you could be the best salesperson in the world, you will not perform well. So the idea is that you don't use sales or marketing or whatever to counteract and to compensate for a bad product or a bad business model or whatsoever or whatever. You actually use sales as a vehicle to transmit and to foster this value proposition. So if you struggle as a sales, and if you are actually skilled, or if you hire a somehow experimented salesperson and you see him struggling with selling your product as an entrepreneur, maybe you should be taking a look at your data, taking a look at your the feedback that you get from your market, and maybe take a look at your product and see if there is anything that could be going wrong there. Okay, and I think it could be taking you a long way. That's what we actually experimented ourselves with Groowster, because when we started, we had quite a lot of difficulties finding, like, actually closing clients, because our model at the time was not as adapted as it should have been, and so we actually struggled quite a lot. But when we changed our model and changed our pricing, and went from a subscription retainer to a pay per lead model, things went a lot easier. And it was just a matter of changing the model and changing the pricing. So I think sales and the ability to close is a good indicator of how good your product and how good your value proposition is. So the idea here is that sales is a pretty powerful tool, because it has you confront directly to the marketplace and gather, and it gets you able to gather feedback from your market and your ideal customer profiles directly, and to improve your model and to improve your product overall. Okay, so the second most common pitfall is that when you are in a sales meeting, people will usually tend to mistake value proposition with features. Okay, the idea here and the cornerstone idea here is that your prospects do not care about your product whatsoever, and your product, as I told you, is only a vehicle to your value proposition, which is how which problem you solve within the marketplace. Okay, so prospect only do care about the problems that you solve for them and what kind of value and what kind of return on investment you manage to get them. And so the idea here is to not, when you are in a sales meeting, not be all about, yeah, our product is in the very best on the market, will be on the market for like 5 years, 10 years, and we're so much better than our competitors, and we have quite a range of features, and we feature this and this and that. It's not gonna work as well as if you simply put it that way. Mr. Prospect, we make your life and work days n times much more enjoyable and n times much more profitable by solving X problem. And our products will be our way for you to solve this problem, product or services. Okay, so my advice here is don't don't mistake feature than value proposition, and be really cautious when you talk to a prospect, not making this mistake. Okay, so the third pitfall is slacking about proper qualification. Qualification is paramount to success in sales, and if you don't qualify your prospects, you are pretty much screwed in sales, because the idea of qualification is to identify whether your product is a good fit to your prospect's problem. But if you want to figure out whether it's a good fit or not, you need to gather intelligence. So how do you gather intelligence? You do it by identifying your prospect's problem through open-ended and precise and empathetical questions. And empathy is paramount to a good qualification. And basically, qualifications should last at least 2/3 of the conversation with your prospect, and it's gonna pave the way for you to close in the end. Okay, so the idea of qualifying a prospect the good way is not to have your list of questions and to write it down as fast as possible and to get it out of the way. No, you have to do it in a genuine and empathetical way. You have to really go down the road of finding your prospect's deeply etched problem, and to find it and to identify the psychological implications, the economical implications. How does it feel about his problems, and how does it impact his work days? How does it impact his nights? Like, how serious is it of a problem? And this idea of empathy and genuine and sincerity will take you a long, long way. So qualification is not like having a list of questions. Really have a proper talk with your prospects. Okay, and so my advice here is to shape your qualification into a conversation and not an interrogation. Like, make it interactive, make it like pleasant to your prospect. Okay, don't be like that cop who is asking the questions and who is actually voicing and never giving. Okay, don't hesitate to extrapolate a bit and make it so that your prospect is in an environment for opening in, himself and to giving you the best insight on his problem and how you could be solving it. Okay. So the fourth most common pitfall is actually skipping on your CRM. Okay. So I'm not talking about any precise software per se. I'm not talking about software even, because I think there are tons of good CRM softwares on the market. But what I'm saying here is that if you want to close and if you want to be a successful in sales, you will need to be following up quite a few times, because you are actually dependent on your prospect's agenda and your prospect's occupations, and so you will have to follow up at some point.
Benoit, we cannot hear you anymore. Can you hear me?
And the close was made in a few minutes. Okay. So the idea, a simple hack that you can put in place and that will help you a lot is when you reach the end of a sales meeting, it could be a call or whatever, set a time and date, precise time and date with your prospect for the next step. Okay, so do not leave all blank and not knowing where you're going. Actually frame it up front with the prospect and arrange it so that he will know when you will be getting back to him. Okay, and it will help you a lot. And the idea is that as long as your prospect doesn't say no precisely to you, you should be following up as long as necessary and calling him back and emailing him back as often as possible until he gets back to you. And you could be doing that every 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks, and do it consistently, and you will see how much your closing rate increases. And technically speaking, a Google Calendar or HubSpot CRM or even spreadsheet can be pretty handy at first when you are a one person or two people or three people team, and it can work wonder. Okay. Personally, I use a combination of HubSpot CRM and Google Calendar. So I've got all my meetings all lined up in Google Calendar. I can show it to you now if you will. So I've got all my meetings here, which are my appointments, and here is my to-do list. So I plan like daily events here, so that I know when I log in the morning what appointments I have during the day and what I should be fitting into the blanks here. So I've got pretty much a clear sight of what I should be making my day of. Okay, so don't make it too complicated at first. Okay, the idea is just to follow up as often as possible and within the right timing. Okay, so the fifth pitfall is impersonating someone you are not. Sales, as I told you, is about being genuine and being trustworthy. If your prospect doesn't trust you, you will just never make the sales and you will never be able to close him. Okay, so so the worst idea and the worst thing that you could be doing would be to enter in some kind of a role play and to try and act as and talk as someone you are not. Okay, that was one of the big problems that I have in the beginning. I was actually trying to be all I was using a mannerism and using a way of talking that just wasn't me, and I felt pretty uncomfortable during sales meeting. So it was pretty unpleasant to me, and I was pretty stressed out because I felt that was the right thing to do, and my prospect actually felt it. And how could you be could you actually trust somebody if you see that that person is actually not being sincere and acting as someone he isn't? And if you feel some kind of insincerity with the salesperson you have in front of you, you will just never be able to trust him. Okay, so the idea is that you need to work on being yourself at all costs, and that may sound like common sense, and sales is a game of common sense, in a nonsensical words. Okay, that's my idea of sales. But the idea that is pretty hard when you're in an environment that involves money and that involves collaboration with somebody that you don't know personally, to be yourself. And you may fear for someone else's, your interlocutor's judgment, and you may be fearing for him, like thinking bullshit about you. Okay, so the idea is to work on that, to be yourself at all cost, and talk like you talk usually, and to be aligned with your values and principles. Okay, so a simple trick that will help you solve that and be more confident when you're talking with a prospect is to bear in mind that the sole fact that your prospect accepted a meeting with you is an indicator that he has some kind of interest and so consideration in what you are actually doing. Okay, so nobody will plan on a call with you if he doesn't care about you, and if he consider that you don't have anything to give him. Okay, so bear that in mind, and you will be much more at ease when talking to prospects. So the sixth one is improper or not using a script. Okay, so sales is a science and not an art. Okay, you don't you don't need to go all Da Vinci when doing sales. Okay, it's much more about experimentation, and it's much more about using the right tactics and the right tonalities and the right best practices. Okay, rather than being all inspired. Okay, and so as I told you, being yourself does not mean that selling is about improvising and about going all artistic. Okay, it's not going to work whatsoever. There are actually rules that you must be following, and every sales call has to follow some kind of milestones. Okay, which we'll be going through on the next slide. But although some kind of script is necessary, you need to avoid reading one, because it's just going to sound awkward on the phone. Okay, so a script could be anything from something written that you actually write, from something that you have in mind, and in that you actually frame over consistently calling new prospects. Okay, and at time. So the first step would be to actually experiment around with your arguments, with the objections that your market gives you, and with the pitches that you would be A/B testing. Okay, so the pitch will have you go through different kinds of features with your product, and over time you will be able to somehow frame some kind of sales script in your mind. Okay, so that is the first step. And if you keep doing that for 10, 20, 30, 50 calls, at the end of the 50th call, you will see that you have some kind of mental models in your mind that have you be much more structured during your calls and have you being much more efficient. Okay, and the second step is when you get to scale your sales team. The idea will be to take all the data that you have on your mind or that you have written here and there, okay, and to gather it into your first sales playbook. And the idea of this sales playbook is that it's actually data driven and results driven, because it's the results of thousands of hundreds, maybe thousands of hours talking with your market. And when giving that sales playbook to your first employee in sales, you will see that he's going to perform way better. Okay, so the sales script is really, really important, and you need to be using it the right way. So here is how I usually structure my sales calls. So the first step is that you need to somehow break the ice with your prospects, because whether you actually opted for some kind of cold calling tactics, or it's the result of inbound marketing, at one point you need to be creating bounds with your prospect. And so the idea is that what you usually do is ask a couple questions, like like some kind of personal questions to a prospect. How is he doing? And how is he feeling today? Okay, just to build that rapport. And then I hop on a 10 seconds speech on my company so that you know what I'm doing, and we can take it from there. Okay. The second step is the step of qualification, or what I call intelligence gathering. It's the point, and it's maybe the most important point of the script. It's the step where you actually identify your prospect's needs through well thought out questions, and usually open-ended questions. And the idea is to go in depth into his needs and his psychological implications. As I told you, is very, very important. Then the third step, where once you have identified the needs, is to shape some kind of product pitch that is aligned around the needs that you identified. So the idea is that you plug everything together and you orient it around the value that you would be providing and the problems that you will be solving, rather than the features of your product, which are vehicles to the value that you could you actually proposing. Okay. The fourth step is usually the first call to action, which is simply asking the prospect for the sale. Okay, it usually doesn't really work the first time, and the opportunity here is that you will have the prospect give you the first objections, and that's usually the point where things get actually interesting during the call, because it will be giving you the first objections, which are usually not that genuine and are usually what I call smoke screens. Okay, and the idea will be to dig into those objections to identify what the problem really is, and to address it. Okay, so keep on qualifying, keep on asking questions on those objections, dig into them, and you will see that the real problem usually isn't the one that you got at first sight. And spoiler alert, the problem is usually a problem of trust. Then, when you actually dug into the objections quite a bit, and you have identified and addressed them, comes the point of the second call to action, which is asking for the sale a second time. And you will see at this point if you addressed the objections well or not, because you will see if it works or not. And if it doesn't work, simply repeat the previous steps over and over again. And at one point, you will see if how the call goes. And if it goes in an open account, if you actually close the sales, if you actually lose the lead, or if it's not mature enough, and if it needs some nurturing, and if it needs you to follow up. Okay, so that's how I usually do. That's how I've been closing closing for my bootcamp. The calls usually last anywhere between 30 to 45 minutes, and I'm usually able to go through all these steps and to close in the end in a really short sales cycle. Okay, so it's really efficient. The seventh pitfall is slacking on proper training. As I told you, sales is a science, but it's also pretty redundant, and it's resemblant with a sport. Okay, and like all sports, you will not be successful, or not be as successful as you could be in sales if you're not well prepared. Okay, and so the idea is that I am a true believer that with proper training, anyone can reach expert level in sales and become really efficient and proficient. Okay, so and it all comes down to being able to spend some time every day to prepare yourself, to review your script, and to maybe do like some kind of role play. And that is a pretty interesting thing to do, although it could sound a little awkward at first. But the idea would be to hop on a kind of play with one of your colleagues, for example, or one of your co-founders, and one would be acting as a prospect, and the other one would be acting as the sales, okay, and to basically play his own role. And the idea would be to spend somehow like 30 minutes per day doing that, and every time roles would be switching, and every time and the idea would be that the person acting as a prospect would change his behavior, change his personality, and change his needs at every call. Okay, and so over time, you will see that you will become much more confident with your actual sales calls, and that you will be able to go through pretty much all the objections that you could meet and that you could have to deal with in a real-time call. Okay, so that is that is a pretty interesting thing to do. That is a thing that we have done in-house within Groowster for quite a time, and it worked wonder because it had its ramp up from beginner sales to more advanced sales, and to be much more proficient doing sales. Okay. So yeah, bear in mind that being well trained will have you be more confident, more alert, and more prone to making the difference in real-time environments. The pitfall number 8 is positioning yourself as a sales and rather than an expert. Okay, so the underlying idea here is that when you are in a sales meeting, what we call power ratio is very important. And the idea is that if your prospect is dominant on you at any point or in any way, and feels dominant at any point, it will become really, really hard for you to actually handle the meeting as you should be, and to close the deal in a win-win fashion. Okay, which is very important because you don't want to be slacking on your pricing, and you don't want to be slacking on your features or whatever. Okay, so the idea here is that when you impersonate a salesperson, you usually have that ethos and attitude of being usually self-centered and profit-driven. Okay, so that's the embodiment, the usual embodiment that we have of a sales, and the usual idea that we have of a sales. Okay, so the idea here is that you operate some kind of mind shift, going from that salesperson all the way to an expert whose role is only to advise and to help the prospect with finding a solution to the problem. And it's going to take you a long, long way, and you're going to feel much more confident and much more comfortable being that expert. Okay, so and what it's gonna imply in a real environment is that as you can see, sales people usually avoid reaching out to sales because we all hate being sold to, and rather people will always come to an expert because the expert will be able to advise and to help solve a problem. And you can experiment with it on your LinkedIn account. Change your headline from co-founder, for example, to sales development representative, for example, and you will see how many how well less engagement and interactions you get on LinkedIn, and it will show you how much people just don't like talking to sales. Okay, and then try and change your headline to an expert, so expert in your field. So for example, my headline on LinkedIn is B2B lead generation expert, and you will see where it takes you and how much more interactions you get. Okay, so be an expert and understand. The ninth pitfall is not digging into objections. I gave you my ideal sales script, okay? And now I would like to get a bit more within that idea of objections. So as I told you, an objection is a smoke screen, okay? So people will, your prospect will usually give you an objection which is not the real problem in the end, okay? And so usually people would tell you that, oh, okay, I don't have time for this now, or things are pretty packed for now. Can you call me back in September, or can you call me back in 3 weeks time, okay? Because I'm really really busy, okay? This is bullshit, okay? And it's usually a smokescreen that's whose role is to hide the real problem. And if you get to dissipate that that smoke, and to identify the real problem, you will see that your ability to close goes up tremendously. Okay, so what the prospect tells you is often the tip of the iceberg, and what you want to do is to really dig deep, really deep into psychological and deeply etched implications of your prospects. And the idea is to be double the to have double the empathy that you had in the beginning of the call. Okay, and being genuine and being empathetic will take you a long way. Okay, uh, and one tip here is to actually identify whether the objection is trust-based. So if the prospect actually has a lack of trust in you or in your product or in your company, if it's money-based, so if he just doesn't have the budget to work with you, or if it's value-based or problem solution fit based. Okay, so value based would be that the value that you propose to the prospect is not actually valuable or strong enough. And if in problems versus solution fit based would be that the problem that you actually identified does not fit with the solution that you could bring on the table. Okay, so identify which kind is it, and then take it up from there. And you will see that over time you will have different ways of handling objections. Okay, depending on your product and depending on your business model and so on. And the last pitfall is I think the most dramatic one, but also the easiest to solve, and it's showing a hesitation or some kind of emotion when giving your price, which we do, which a lot of people do, and it's really, really, really serious because if you this is a one time when you don't want to be hesitant, because if you show an ounce of hesitation when giving your price, the sales is over and done with 90% of the time. Okay, because if you show hesitation, how can you be trustworthy, and how can the prospect trust you, and how can he feel that the price that you just gave is worth your product and is worthy. Okay, so what you so the idea is that the moment when you actually pitch your price is a make it or break it moment. And so how should I put it? The idea is that a pretty easy way to identify whether you are showing some kind of emotion or hesitation is when you need to pitch, to give your price along some kind of justifications and giving the reasons why your price is so high and why you actually priced that way. Okay, so when you say that, when you pitch your price and go like, okay, so what you get, what you get is da 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 and da 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 and da da da, and in the end it's gonna cost you that. Okay, this is entering what I call justification mode, and it's gonna have you lose the sales most of the time. Okay, so when giving your price, just go, it's that much. Okay, don't be hesitant, just go blank, and don't show an ounce of emotion, and just give your price without any kind of justification. Okay, your price is what it is, and take it as a baseline for you to dig a bit little deeper into the sales, and you will see how your prospect reacts. Okay, but it's not yours to actually emotionalize on your price. It's your prospect's role to actually show hesitation or emotion, not yours. And if you do it, you do it, your prospects will just not do it, and you will just lose the sales. Okay. And one tip here that I can give you now is that the right pricing is for your product, at least for a start, is the pricing that you are at ease with. Okay, so and usually the right pricing for your product at first is the first one that comes to your mind when thinking about your product. Okay, so when creating a new product, or if you want to experiment on a new business model for a service or a product or whatever, just ask yourself, um, like, just think about your product and think about the pricing, and usually you will think about a figure. Okay, so usually, like, I know my SaaS is 50 euros per month. Okay, that is your baseline, and the first price that came to your mind is the one that you are most at ease with. Okay, and given that it is the one that you're most comfortable with, it is the one that you are most likely to close with. Okay, and that's what I've done with my bootcamp. Okay, so I knew at the time that I was underpricing it. Okay, and it was worth 500 euros at the time for the day, but I knew that it was the one that I was most comfortable with, so I decided to go with it. Okay, and it worked wonder, and I wouldn't have been able to close that much if it had been like 200 euros more expensive. Okay, and if it had been like 700 euros, I would just never have been able to close that much, because I just would have felt uncomfortable when giving my price. Okay, and it would just have broken every sales call. Okay, so that's it with the 10 most common pitfalls that I have done and that I've got to solve. Okay, so here is a little sum up for you. I think Alexandra will be handing you the slides at the end of the webinar
Yes,
for you to yeah, go a little deeper into those. Uh, Before we go, I would like to give you 4 operational advices for your next that you can implement within your next sales call. So the first one is that bear in mind that whoever asks the questions is in control of the conversation. Okay, so you just don't want to go in that call where it is the prospect asking you the questions, and that is the worst thing that you could do. Okay, so be sure that you are the one asking them, and to do that, start as early as you can within the call. Okay, the second one is that your prospect should do at least 80% of the talking. Okay, if you talk more than 20%, you're screwed. Okay, and it's not a good sales call. Okay, and because the more your prospect talks, and the more words comes out of his mouth, the more opportunities you get to identify the needs and to solve them and to close them. Okay. The third one is don't confront an objection with an argument, rather redirect with a question. Okay, so the idea is that the worst case scenario that you could find yourself in is entering that justification mode when you are trying to persuade your prospect that your product is the best one, and that you are the best option. Okay, bear in mind that your prospect whether you're in B2C or B2B, it doesn't matter whatsoever. Actually buy with emotion and justify it with logic. Okay, so if you enter that justification mode and you try to go all rational, like rational about your product and about the conversation, it's not gonna turn out well. Rather, what you should do is try and redirect the objection into another question. Okay, and like the idea is to see a sales call as some kind of Tai Chi fight and not a boxing fight. Okay, you're not boxing with a prospect, you're doing Tai Chi.
Benoit, we cannot hear you anymore, I think.
Sales call, it's a hangout call, a phone call, or whatever. You should be deciding on the place as well. If it's at your office, if it's at the restaurant, whatever, you should be deciding on that. Then set the time frame, which is decide how long it's gonna last, okay? Or at least act like you're deciding on it. So, and you should be starting all sales conversations by setting the tone and framing the conversation upfront and saying the agenda. So Mr. Prospect, here are the things that you are gonna cover together today, and here is how long it's gonna do, and here is the outcome that we want to have at the end of the sales call. Does it make sense to you? Okay, and that is how you frame a sales call and a sales conversation up front. And you will see that doing that, you will have much more opportunities to take control of the conversation and ask the questions and to actually help and give value to your prospect. Okay, so here it is for the 4 operational advices. You be sure to implement them for your next conversations, and you will see how well it goes. Okay. Before we go, here is a little bit.ly where you will get one of our ebooks, which is in English. So don't hesitate to open it, and you will get 50 operational tips and tricks on sales, copywriting, prospecting, and time management as well. Okay, so you will have some tips that I just gave you now, and some additional ones as well. Okay. So if you have any question now, I'll be happy to address them.
Thank you very much, Benoit, for this great presentation and all those tips. I'm sure it will be useful for everyone. So if you have any question, please write it on the question box at the right of your screen, and I will read it in order that Benoit answer it.
I cannot see the chat window, right?
No.
No? Okay.
I will write it for you.
Thank you.
Is there any question? You can also use the chat box if you want. Okay. No question for now, so I think it has been pretty clear. So, of course, I will send you the presentation and all the slides after this webinar and the link to the YouTube channel. You will be able to watch it again. And if you have some question afterwards, you will be able to ask it directly to Benoit by email. I will include it into the loop, so feel free to ask him everything about this topic or the bootcamp.
Yeah.
Maybe you want to add something?
Yeah, just to give you a bit of what I've been selling and what kind of products I've been selling using the techniques that I gave you. We do lead generation partnerships as an agency where we take care of our B2 or of our clients' B2B lead generation strategies. Okay, so we work with any kind of digital products, ranging from SaaS to digital marketing services. And the second one is a 1 day lead generation bootcamp, which takes place in Paris, and the next one is on the 16th of July, and we have our clients learn how to generate leads using LinkedIn and cold emailing in 1 day, plus one online crash course the week before. Okay, so be sure to give a click at groovstory.co, and you will get access to the syllabus and see how that could be helpful to you. And so don't hesitate to give us a shout if you need any help with implementing the tips within your business. And also, you can get our free resources. So that is tools, articles, free ebooks on our website here, which is groovester.com.